A very disturbing slash scary episode of La Rosa de Guadalupe, Te va a salir el payaso. This episode came out in 2017, around the same time when the 2016-2017 Killer Clown videos were coming out.
I remember. Everybody was scared to go out at that time.
It was all over the news.
Univision covered that shit too.
Basically, this episode, there's a 15 to 16-year-old kid. He's just a troublemaker. He's trying to be the class clown, and his friends are exactly the same, right? So they decide, yo, let's rob a liquor store. And one of the friends ends up pulling out a fake gun. Keep in mind, they only rob like chips. They just wanted to do it because they're bored. Some time passes and they're scrolling through the internet and they come across these videos that are going viral.
The clown videos.
They want to be part of it. This is low-key when it starts getting a little dark. They catch this old lady. She's walking in the street at night alone. So she ends up getting so scared that she basically gets a heart attack and dies. And it doesn't even stop them, bro, because after that, they post the video and they continue doing it. Their very last victim, right, is a young kid. He was walking from the grocery store or something like that. They catch him. They start doing the same. He starts screaming for help. His pops comes out. The whole neighborhood starts waking up. The whole neighborhood starts saying, yo, those are the motherfuckers that have been like terrorizing the whole town.
No, don't tell me.
Let's get them. They get cornered. One of the friends pulls out the fake gun. Someone in the crowd pulls a real gun out and is like, ahora sí te va a salir el payaso. He ends up shooting him, bro.
What the
Aguas, aguas. Ahora sí, les va a salir el payaso.
No fuck.
Never come out at night if you hear a rooster crow. That is what David's grandmother used to always tell him growing up. They say that roosters only crow in the morning. Side note, I do hear my mom's roosters crow at nighttime, so what the fuck? David's grandmother used to always warn him about roosters crowing at nighttime. She would tell him if he hears a rooster crowing in the middle of the night, it's because the devil is near. David admits that he never believed in that. That was until one night when he was home alone. He heard a rooster crow and it was so loud he felt like his ears were about to explode. And even though his grandmother had warned him many times about this, he was so curious, so he opened the door to go look outside. He said that as soon as he opens the door to walk outside, he got the craziest goosebumps. He said that he saw a shadow and the only thing that he can make out were the eyes because they were almost like glowing and they wouldn't blink or stop looking right at him. He also saw a rooster, a black rooster, and it almost looked like it had blood all over it. And in a split second, he heard a voice coming from where those eyes were.
David, come with me, David.
He said that he was so scared and somehow was able to move and ran back into that house, locked the door, and made sure every window and other doors were locked as well. He says that even now when he hears a rooster crow in the middle of the night, he just feels like he has those eyes on him and somebody is watching him. He feels like when he hears it, he just knows that this thing is waiting for him to come out to make that mistake again and maybe even take him. Another thing to add to the list of shit I need to be scared of, cause what the fuck?
Have you heard of the scarecrow that haunts the fields of Pungo, Virginia? Locals say it watches and waits with a story that stretches back for generations. It all began when the small town of Pungo was mostly farmland. Farmers placed scarecrows to keep birds away, but one scarecrow stood out, a figure so lifelike it made the hair on your neck stand up just to look at it. They say a farmer named Jedediah created it from scraps and cloth, with hollow eyes that seemed to follow you wherever you went. Over time, strange things began to happen. Crops withered, animals vanished, and people avoided the fields, swearing they saw the scarecrow move. One fall evening, a young boy dared his friends to touch it. As he reached out, the scarecrow seemed to lean forward, its straw-filled hand reaching back. Since that night, the scarecrow's legend grew. Some say it's still out there, cursed to guard the fields in silence, waiting for the next visitor. Would you dare visit Pungo's haunted fields? They say the scarecrow doesn't like visitors. They say if you look close enough, you might see it blink. Follow for more haunted tales.
If you are inside your home with the lights out, do not look outside your window. Turn on your lights before you look through any window. Do not leave your home if you see a figure outside. Even if he is turned away, do not look at him. Lock all doors and windows before turning off all lights inside your residence. Hide in a small space and call authorities. Do not move from hiding unless you hear an unfamiliar voice. If you do hear a familiar voice coming from inside your home, do not move. He is inside. He is inside. He is inside.
I just watched this movie probably for the first time since it came out in 2003. Let's do it. Wrong Turn opens up with this couple, Rich and Hallie, and they're rock climbing in the middle of the woods. And Rich even specifically makes a comment to Hallie saying, we're like 50 miles away from anything, like nobody's gonna hear you scream out here. And when Rich gets to the top of the cliff that they are climbing, he is murdered by somebody that Hallie cannot see. And then whoever killed him tries to yank her up the cliff, and she has no other choice but to cut her rope, which causes her to fall off the cliff. The fall doesn't kill her, and she tries to escape, but she is caught by this line of barbed wire and pulled back into the woods. Now we cut to some time later and we meet Chris Flynn, who is a medical student, and he is traveling somewhere for like an interview or a meeting, and he gets caught up in this traffic jam, which causes him to have to turn around, and he goes to this gas station to try to get a phone or to try to get directions. And he meets this old dude who might be part of the family that is going to be in this movie. And he gives Chris absolutely no help at all, but Chris manages to find a map and leaves with it. And after Chris leaves, we see the old man say something cryptic about going into the woods. So he obviously knows that something's up. So as Chris is driving down this long, winding dirt road, he gets distracted and he ends up running into another car. And this car consists of this group of friends that are on a road trip. And the reason that they are pulled over on the side of the road is because they ran over some barbed wire, which made them get a flat tire, and now they're stuck. So we have Carly and Scott, who are a couple, Francine and Evan, who are a couple, and Jesse. So both cars are totaled. Nobody has cell phone service because it's 2003 and they have fucking Nokias. So the four of them decide that they're going to walk off and try to go find help. And meanwhile, Evan and Francine stay with the cars. Now, Evan hears something in the woods and goes off to investigate. Horror movies 101, don't fucking do that. And after he's gone for a little while, Francine goes in after to look for him, and she finds his severed ear on the ground. So as she starts to scream and run out of the woods, a figure comes up behind her and wraps this barbed wire around her and offs her with it. So the rest of the group is obviously completely unaware of this, and they end up coming upon this house. They knock on the door and nobody's home, but they decide that they're going to go in and use the phone anyway. And they are absolutely horrified to find body parts all over the place. So as they understand we need to get the fuck out of here, the occupants of the house come home. And it's at this point that we see that the villains in this story are this inbred cannibalistic family. And they come in dragging Francine's corpse with them, so now everybody knows that she's dead. And these four hide and have no choice but to watch as they dismember and eat Francine. So eventually the group all hides there long enough for the cannibals to fall asleep, and they try to make a run for it, but of course the cannibals hear them and wake up and chase them into the woods. So they eventually get to this open field where they find all of these abandoned cars, and they understand that these are the cars of the previous victims of this family. And they come up with a plan, and Chris is like, I'm gonna run and distract them, you guys get to their truck and drive away. As Chris is going to do this, they shoot him in the leg. Scott then decides that he is going to create a diversion so the two girls can go get Chris. So they manage to grab him and put him in the truck, but when they open the door, Evan's body falls out. But the three of them manage to get in the truck, they drive away, and they find the road, and they wait for Scott, who's running through the woods towards them. But just before he can make it to the car, he is shot in the back with arrows and dies. So obviously the rest of them, especially his girlfriend Carly, are fucking horrified, but they keep driving on. And eventually they get to this old watchtower where they go inside and they find a radio and they're able to call for help. However, the cannibals hear the radio and find them. The three of them barricade the door so the cannibals are unable to get inside, but instead they set the place on fucking fire. So they're looking out the window, they're wondering how they can escape, and they see that they are above all these trees. So Chris takes one for the fucking team and straight up jumps out the window, and the trees break his fall, like he manages to grab onto a branch. So the other two girls do the same thing, and they manage to get to the trees, but now the cannibals start climbing the fucking trees after them. And a very stressful chase ensues, which results in Carly being decapitated by one of them. So now it's just Jesse and Chris, and they devise another plan where Jesse lures one of the cannibals in one direction and then Chris knocks him out with a tree branch. So the two of them eventually get to this cave where they're able to hide out until the morning. The cannibals proceed to find them once daylight comes around. And they proceed to straight up push Chris down this like hill cliff thing and kidnap Jesse. And they take Jesse back to their weird, creepy cannibal cabin. Chris, meanwhile, survives the fall and sets out to look for Jesse, and when he gets to the road, he runs into a police officer, so they got the distress call. But that doesn't last for long because as Chris is trying to explain what's happening to the police officer, he gets an arrow through him. So Chris runs away and watches the cannibals get into their truck. And as they do that, he manages to attach himself to the hitch underneath, and they drive to the cabin. Back at the cabin, we see that Jesse is still alive, but she is tied up and they are preparing to eat her. But before they are able to kill her, Chris shows up and sets the cabin on fire. Took one out of your book, bitch. and then he drives their own truck through the cabin wall. So all three of the cannibals start to fight Chris, but he manages to fight them off and untie Jesse. And as the two of them escape the burning house, Chris takes a shotgun that he had gotten from the cop, and he shoots it at the house, which causes it to explode, killing the cannibals inside. So Chris and Jesse survive, they get in the pickup truck, and they drive back to that gas station. And we once again see this old dude who looks at them as if he's surprised that they survived. He and Jesse take a map and they get the fuck out of there, and the credits roll. And there is a post-credit scene that shows that one of the cannibals did survive, hence all the sequels.
Have you ever heard of the Devil's Trampling Ground? Nah.
Just off a main road in Chatham County, a 40-foot near-perfect circle. A story that's grown for 3 centuries.
This place is supposedly where the devil goes and visits. It's in North Carolina. Yeah. It's this 40-foot circle deep in the woods where no plants can grow, no animals go inside of that circle, and anybody steps in that circle either disappears or they're put out of the circle. Oh. Why can't plants grow? The main urban legend is that at night he would walk and scorch the ground. Yeah. So people actually go and visit this circle, place tents, and they try to sleep at night. This is what happened. They placed their tents. In the morning, their tents would be moved outside of the circle.
Just teleported over?
I guess.
How big is this circle?
40 feet. It's pretty big. And everybody tried to plant stuff. No matter what they plant, man-made plants, it wouldn't survive. The next day, it would die.
Did they like send scientists over to look at it?
No, not even urban legend, just facts. Nothing grows and...
Yo, we should visit.
No, man.
That seems pretty safe.
This one is a classic. Let's do it. The Shining opens up by introducing us to Jack Torrance, and he is at the Overlook Hotel in an interview to be the caretaker of the hotel for the winter. So this hotel is located in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado and closes for the season every winter. During the interview, the manager, Stuart Ullman, tells Jack that one of the previous caretakers named Grady went crazy one winter and killed his 2 daughters and his wife and then himself, and the police just chalked it up to cabin fever. But Jack insists that he and his family will be fine, and he's a writer, so he's actually looking for some peace and quiet to write his next book. So back in Boulder, we meet Jack's wife and son, Wendy and Danny Torrance. Danny immediately starts exhibiting this weird behavior, like he has this imaginary friend named Tony. And when Wendy gets a doctor to come look at him, he tells her that Tony lives in the back of his mouth. And Danny speaks in Tony's voice and does this little finger movement when he does. Now, while the doctor is there examining Danny, Wendy tells her about this previous incident between Jack and Danny. And she tells the doctor that Jack was an alcoholic, and one day he came home from work and Danny had scattered some of his papers all over the floor. And in this drunken rage, he grabbed Danny so hard that he dislocated his shoulder. But since then, Jack has been sober for the last few months. At one point, we see Danny in the mirror talking to himself as Tony. And we can tell that he has some kind of psychic ability because as Tony, he's saying to himself, yeah, Jack got the job and he's about to phone Wendy to tell her. And sure enough, he's right. Jack gets the job, and not long after, he and the family set out for the Overlook Hotel for the winter. So they get to the hotel, everybody's packing up and getting ready to leave, and Stuart Ullman is showing Jack around. And they also meet Dick Halloran, who is the hotel's head chef. And as Dick is showing Wendy and Danny around, at one point he looks at Danny and communicates with him without speaking. And a little bit later, when he's alone with Danny, he tells Danny that this ability is called the Shining. And not everybody knows that they have it, but you have it, and that's how we're able to speak without speaking. So the Shining is like this telepathic psychic ability. Now, during this, Dick also informs Danny that the hotel itself also shines. The reason it shines is because there have been terrible events that have happened at this hotel. And during this, he also warns Danny about the hotel room 237, and he tells him to never go in there. So everyone leaves and it's just the family, and eventually we cut to a month later. And we see that Danny is starting to have these visions, including these 2 twins. So one day he's riding on his little trike through the halls and he comes upon the twins and he has a vision of both of them murdered brutally. And it turns out that these are the murdered daughters of Charles Grady, the previous caretaker. We also see that Jack is starting to decline as well, even though honestly he wasn't really all there from the start. He uses this room as a writing room, and one day Wendy comes to check on him and he's just super fucking rude to her and tells her to fuck off. And one day he wakes up screaming and tells Wendy that he had this dream of him violently killing her and Danny. One day when Danny's on his trike, he passes room 237 and sees that the door is open. And something lures him in there, and we don't see what happens to him. But a little bit later, he comes down to find his mom and dad, and Wendy sees that he has these marks all over his neck as if he's been strangled. And she immediately blames Jack for it. So Jack goes to investigate room 237 to see who could be in there and who did this to Danny. And he sees this young, beautiful woman in the bathtub who gets out and approaches him and starts making out with him. as they're kissing, Jack opens his eyes and looks in the mirror and sees that she has turned into this old, decrepit woman with her skin rotting off. But he goes back to the room and tells Wendy there was nobody in room 237, and actually, I think that Danny did this to himself. So again, at this point, Jack is fucking losing it, pretty much has lost it, and he ends up at the hotel bar. And it's there that he sees the apparition of a bartender named Lloyd. And Jack ends up taking a drink from Lloyd and breaking his sobriety. A little bit later on, a butler spills a drink on Jack and takes him to the bathroom to clean him off. And he introduces himself as Grady. So Jack is like, I've heard of you, Mr. Grady. You hacked your wife and kids into pieces and then killed yourself. Grady at first denies it, but then he looks at Jack and he's like, are you aware that your son has called for assistance? And what he means by that is we have seen that Danny has telepathically called out to Dick for help. And Grady says, when my wife and kids tried to defy me, I corrected them, so go correct yours. Jack proceeds to go to the hotel's radio, which is their only means of communication, and destroy it. Meanwhile, Wendy ends up going into Jack's writing room and looking at his typewriter, and he's been typing what she thinks is a novel this whole time. But when she looks at it, it is hundreds and hundreds of pages that just say, all work and no play make Jack a dull boy. And as she is flipping through all these pages, Jack shows up behind her. So Wendy starts crying and telling them that they need to get Danny to a doctor, something's wrong with him. And Jack is becoming more and more threatening, and he is approaching Wendy and she starts backing up these stairs. Meanwhile, she has a baseball bat that she took with her. So Jack basically tells her, we are not leaving this hotel, I have a responsibility. And I'm not gonna hurt you, Wendy, I'm just gonna bash your fucking brains in. But as he gets closer to her, she knocks him unconscious down the stairs with the baseball bat. So Wendy ends up dragging Jack down to the kitchen where she locks him in the pantry, and she tells him that she's gonna go call for help or she's gonna take the snowcat down to town. And Jack just laughs at her and is like, yeah, good luck doing that. And Wendy discovers that the radio has been destroyed and the snowcat has been destroyed as well. So there is no escape and there is no calling for help. Because I think I forgot to mention, but it's winter in Colorado, so there is also this crazy blizzard going on right now. So this whole time we've seen Dick Halloran, who is in Florida, getting these telepathic messages from Danny, and he is on his way to Colorado to help. So Wendy goes to get Danny, and down in the pantry, we see that Jack is freed from the pantry by Grady. Back in the hotel room, Wendy is awoken when she hears Danny screaming the word red rum in Tony's voice, and she wakes up to find that he's also written it in lipstick on the door. But when she goes to hug Danny, she looks in the mirror and sees that this is murder written backwards. And then the moment she has that realization, Jack starts axing his way through the door. So Wendy and Danny hide in the bathroom, and Danny's able to escape through the little window, but she's too big. And Jack proceeds to start axing this door down to get to Wendy, but she manages to cut his hand with a knife. So Jack backs off and leaves, and meanwhile in the lobby we see that Dick Halloran has arrived. Help is here, the day is saved. Just fucking kidding, because Jack immediately kills Dick with an axe. R.I.P. Dick deserved better. So when Dick gets murdered, Danny can feel this telepathically, which causes him to scream out loud, which gives away his hiding space. So Jack starts to come towards him, which causes Danny to run. And now he has nowhere to run but outside. So the hotel has this massive hedge maze, and Danny runs into it. Back in the hotel, Wendy frantically runs around looking for Danny, where she encounters all of these spirits in the hotel. And she also sees that iconic image of a cascading waterfall of blood coming from the elevators. So Danny's running through the hedge maze, and it's very clear that Jack is following his footprints. So Danny, in one of the smartest decisions made in horror, backs up in his own footprints and hides in one of the bushes. So Jack loses his footprints and starts to just kind of go through the maze randomly. So this allows Danny to backtrack and follow his own footprints back out of the maze. So he runs out of the maze just as Wendy is running outside, and the two of them reunite and they get in the snowcat that Dick had driven up, and they get the fuck out of there. And then we cut to the next morning and we see that Jack Torrance has frozen to death in the hedge maze. The movie ends by showing us this picture that is hanging up in the Overlook Hotel. And at the center of this photo that was taken in 1921 is Jack Torrance, and the movie ends. If you have questions and have no idea what the fuck I just said, I did a whole deep dive on this movie and Dr. Sleep on my podcast, so go check it out.
I was watching reels when I heard the knocking when I asked, "Who are you?" Then, in reply, I heard my own voice.
Mama? Luan jauh.